There it goes. All right. Make sure I'm sharing out my screen. Nick, are you able to see we got the deck up?
We've got the deck up, Sam.
Ooh, webinar's live. We're live on Facebook. The deck is up. All of the technology stars have aligned. We've got lots of folks rolling in for today's topic, which I think is really this is probably top of mind for a lot of folks. Nick and I are just getting back from Synergy, fantastic conference down in Orlando, and I'll tell you, we made the drive back yesterday. My family and I hung back for a couple of days, went to Disney, drove back yesterday, and we could just feel the temperature dropping as we went north because of that cold front that pushed through. And Nick, it was snowing in Asheville when we got home last night.
Oh, it was 30 degrees when I landed in St. Louis, about a 50-degree drop. I felt it as we sat on the tarmac for a few hours, but thankfully the flight ultimately was not canceled. So, silver lining there. But yes, quite the switch up from the sunny day spent by the pool after the conference last week. And
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, it was something like 86 or 87 degrees when we were at Epcot eating our way around the world at the Food and Wine Festival, and then we got home. We're like, oh yeah, it is winter now, isn't it? I'm not sure where fall went. It's like we skipped it. We went from summer to winter up here, but hoping for some good fall days. Let's see. It is 102 here on the East Coast, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank everybody for taking a little time out of their day here. Hopefully, Veterans Day. I want a big shout out, big thank you to all of our veterans that have served, any of your family members that are still serving. Hats off to all of our veterans for keeping us safe and we will make the Prezo slides available. They're going to come out in the follow-up. That's gonna come out automatically tomorrow. So you're gonna have all of these slides. Don't worry about screenshots. And then just a matter of housekeeping. Please remember to use that Q&A. I think sometimes we forget to mention it, but if you have questions or comments, we are going to be keeping an eye on that. So Nick and I, as we trade off here, we love seeing the Q&A. Feel free to engage with us that way, and let us know if you want us to turn chat on for future webinars for some of that informal back and forth. I know we've got it turned off right now, but it's something we've been talking about turning back on because it can be fun to have just that quick group chat going sometimes. For those of you that have been on webinars with me before, you might remember my partner in crime is usually Mandy Sullivan. We're happy for Mandy though. Mandy got married recently and is just coming back from her honeymoon. So congrats to Mandy. So we have Nick Hollander, and Nick is no stranger to these webinar series. Nick has been on multiple times, and I'm happy to have him here with me, continuing our dynamic duo from our fun time in Orlando last week. So our agenda today, we are going to leave you with a few bits of really actionable information, but we're gonna go through it systematically. We're gonna talk about some of those small things that we can be doing today to protect our businesses. So one bite at a time is going to be the theme there, and it's all going to be about layers, little layers that build up to big impact. And we're going to talk about why year end matters and what that WISP is really doing for you, the basics of what a WISP is, how it gets created, templates you can use, and then relating all of that to people, process, and technology. So the three legs of that cybersecurity stool and how we build a nice, strong stool for our businesses to sit on. And then we're going to leave you with a template at the end. So there's going to be a QR code you can scan. Like I said, we're going to send all of this out to you in a follow-up email tomorrow. So you'll have all of this at the ready to go back through and review. So we'll start with one bite at a time, and like I mentioned, cybersecurity is all about taking little steps, so putting small layers on top of layers upon it's on top of layers, and just making it as difficult as possible for the bad guys to get through. Multi-factor authentication, it's a pain in the butt. We all know it. None of us like having to do it, but that's that super basic layer that we need to have on top of everything. Just having that is going to make a profound difference in the difficulty level of getting through, especially if we're using complex passwords in conjunction with another layer of authentication. Even if it's just that text that comes out to your phone, that's something. We like to see those authenticator applications like the Google Authenticator, the Microsoft Authenticator. If you're anything like me, you probably have multiple authenticators going because different applications and web-based applications have different protocols that they use. So I have a Duo layer. I've got my authenticator app for Microsoft. I've got a Google one. And then I've got some that just send me a text message every time I want to log in. And others we're even seeing move into a passwordless sort of state where you don't give them a password at all. They're sending you an email, and hopefully you've got multi-factor on your email to protect that one-time passcode. So remember, it's all about layers. So multi-factor authentication is one of those tiny actions that you can take that's going to make a big difference. And as we go through today, we're going to be talking about some other actions that are going to be areas of focus inside of your WISP and some of those Security 6 that the IRS put out a couple of years ago that are still super relevant. So, six technology focused layers that really we should be looking at and making sure that we're still doing what's best for our business. And then finally, that last theme that we're going to be talking about as we go through this is about putting reasonable protection in place for reasonable risk. Because we could stay on this for the hour and we could talk about some Department of Defense level protocols that you could put in place for your firm, but would that really be reasonable for your risk level? So Nick's going to talk with us as we go on through here and talk about what risk is and how we assess it. So as we keep going, why does year end matter for the WISP conversation, Nick?
Yeah, I mean, I probably don't have to tell anybody on this call, but going into tax season and tax season itself is a whirlwind of craziness, late nights, long days, all of it. And as we've got noted there, it is a hacker's Super Bowl, right? There is a sense of urgency about during tax season that is, a red flag in scams, right? Get these things done quickly. So as you're in the process of renewing those P10s, this is the time of the year that you are processing the most data, possible. You've got clients trying to send you PII, and other, sensitive data via your email instead of your dedicated, client hub and portal, right? That you've reminded them over and over about. So there is all of this activity and sense of urgency that is really easy for bad actors to pick up and insert themselves into. We see a surge in ransomware, phishing, voice phishing, right? All of these tools now that are empowered by AI, even more so that we're going to talk on a little bit later. And when we were at Synergy last week, somebody shared a story with us of an experience they had last year during tax season, and that one of their softwares had become compromised, and the bad actors got in there and actually began changing bank routing numbers and account numbers for direct deposits of returns that year. So they actually had to rely on their WISP and enact that incident response plan that we're going to cover here in a little bit.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the client portals because we are talking about layers today, and a client portal is an amazing layer. So having a policy, so it's a statement that you say, "Hey, Mr. Client, we really need you to just submit all of your documents through this portal." Which is typically just a website. You guys all know that, or it's a link in your email signature, and that takes them out to a site where they can drop those files. That's a great layer. I know several accountants that we work with that have told us that under no uncertain terms will they accept PDFs or Word documents, no attachments in emails. And in fact, one of our clients that we work with has set up a rule. The rule is when the email comes in, if it has an attachment, if it's not from specific places that send them invoices that they know they're going to get. So they've got some exceptions to the rule. If a client sends something and it's as an attachment, the rule in Outlook is going to kick off a response that reminds them, hey, your email's been deleted. need to use this portal. And so that's taking it to an extreme and really having a black and white policy and removing the gray area and the ambiguity from, well, I've always done it this way, Nick. Why can't you take it from me this way anymore? And I know that can be hard, especially when we work with folks that aren't very tech savvy, that may think that using a portal is going to be too difficult. So it can take some hands-on training or some prep work on the front end with some easy to follow step-by-step documentation. But yeah, those portals are great. Renewing your PTINs. Remember when we're doing our PTIN renewals, it's asking us about our WISP. So that's why we're having this conversation now. You guys are all going through and renewing those PTINs. So we'll keep going. Um, Bookkeepers, yeah. So who needs a WISP? I guess is the question we're really asking right now. The FTC says that if you are a financial institution, you have to have a WISP. So by default, all of our tax prep clients, all of our tax prep friends are going to require or be required to have a WISP. But the FTC goes as far as to kind of define what a financial institution is. And I believe the number, Nick, if I'm not mistaken, it's like 500 individuals PII if you hold that, right?
That's correct.
It's a pretty
Yeah.
low threshold. So if you are, for example, if you do payroll as a firm, maybe you're not a tax practice, but you process payroll and you do that for 10 companies and there's 50 employees per company. Congratulations, you're a financial institution. So it's really better to err on the side of caution and walk through the WISP process. It can look like a daunting task, but Nick and I are going to talk to you about really the four main steps to a WISP, and what we're looking at, what we're defining, and what we're putting into place from an enforcement and a response perspective. So it doesn't have to be big and daunting and scary. But if you are in the financial services industry, our recommendation would be to walk through that WISP process because it really can be just so enlightening, if nothing else, and help you understand where your risks are. It can also be a trust builder for clients. So if you've gone through all the prep work and you've defined policies for your firm, whether you're a solopreneur or you've got a few helpers on your team, even administrative helpers, if you can say to a client, we've put some thought into how we're going to handle your data. This is how we secure it. This is how we ensure that we're not um, um, opening ourselves to unnecessary risk by accepting attachments like we talked about. That can be a real trust builder and gain some credibility with your clients that you're doing everything that you can to, again, put reasonable protection in place for reasonable risk. And so that's FTC mandated, like I mentioned. So anybody that's a financial institution does have to comply with this. And keep in mind that the IRS is really one of the top targets for these types of incidents. The IRS has a really big staff, even with the layoffs. And as Nick's going to share with us a little while, it's going to be about people. So people are a risk factor, and so the IRS is full of people. And the IRS is full of sensitive data, social security numbers, dates of birth, routing and account numbers. So the IRS is just repeatedly being hammered at to try to get through. And that trickles right on down to the folks that originate that data. So you guys out there that are helping your clients get their tax returns filed, whether it's individual or corporate, all of that data becomes a target for the bad guys. And so the FTC looked at that and said, yeah, this isn't really just about big business anymore. We need to make sure that everybody that's handling this data is aware of what they should be doing to protect that data. So that's why the FTC mandates the WISP, and that's why it affects this industry. Um, so I guess what the heck is a WISP is what we should talk about. So that written information security plan is what we're talking about. I'm sure everyone's familiar with that acronym by now. We've been talking about it. You've been hearing about it from lots of your vendors probably, and lots of IRS communication. So that written information security plan. In its simplest form, you can think of it as a document that outlines where your risks exist. And so what we're talking about there is, where is my data held? Who has access to it? And from which devices can they access it? So, in other words, are we saying that we're only going to use laptops that are provided by the firm, or are we saying that we have a bring your own device policy, which is also super common these days, especially now that we've moved into a much more web-based practice? We're seeing almost everything has a software as a service or a web version that's available to it now. QuickBooks, big push to QuickBooks Online, right? Some of you may still be on desktop, and even that may be cloud hosted at this point. So with this big shift back into cloud, we're seeing a lot more of the need for that bring your own device, and it's a pretty good split on whether we're allowing for that in firms, or if we're saying, okay, we're only going to use business devices. But the point of the WISP is to write it down and say we have a policy one way or the other. And then it's to talk about what we do to minimize the blast radius if we do have an incident, we do have a breach. And so we do that by also looking at the protections that we're going to put in place or already have in place. So when we're writing that WISP, we're going through our template, we're saying, here are the things that we do from a technology perspective to protect data. Here's what we do from just a stated policy perspective, which that again goes back to client portals and attachments. Do we accept attachments or don't we? That becomes a policy. And then it's about defining how we're going to respond. So at the end of that written information security plan is also a little bit of an incident response planning section. And that's knowing, okay, based on the state in which I do taxes, if we're a tax prep firm, what are the rules? Do I have to contact my IRS liaison? Do I have to contact my state attorney general? What does my state tell me that I have to do? Because it's a little different state by state. So just sitting down, looking at that, and knowing who to contact in the event of an incident before that incident happens means that you're going to be much more prepared to be calm and make all the right phone calls and notify all the right people. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about a WISP. It's looking at our risks, it's writing down what we do to mitigate those risks, and then it's being aware of what we have to do if there's a breakdown or a failure and something gets through. I was on the wrong slide that whole time. We'll go back just so we can see it. Where is it? There it is. What is a WISP? We got there, Nick.
Looks beautiful. Beautiful slide. On to the next one, Sam. So some of the focus areas here that are, being outlined in the list as Sam was speaking to, and policy and things like that. And, starting with that risk assessment and ultimately ending with that, actionable enforcement plan. So I'm not going to go through these one by one here, but, it's asking ourselves these questions. How are we vetting our vendors? How do they fit in to our plan? Is MFA enabled anywhere? As you've heard us harping on, MFA is table stakes these days, no matter how much we dislike it. But the way I looked at breaking these down and kind of categorizing some of these focus areas within the WISP, they're going to be, first your administrative safeguards. So designating that qualified individual. Is that the owner? Is that somebody, you designate as good with technology in the firm that's going to enact the policy if needed? Conducting regular risk assessments. So not only writing that WISP that first time, Sam, but understanding that we've changed things. The company has grown. We have changed softwares here. We have a new provider in this area, and revisiting those documents and reevaluating as time progresses. And then training your staff, that's going to fall under administrative safeguards as well. Empowering your people. We understand that they can be that weak link, but what are we doing to support them and strengthen the business? Number two is going to be those technical safeguards. That's stuff that, may seem like a foreign language sometime. That is, the multi-factor authentication, encryption, whether that is, via email, data security if you're using a hosting provider, secure access controls. What do those policies look like? Who can access from where? What devices? And then, monitoring through an advanced, modern antivirus tool. Things like that are going to fall under our technical safeguards that you see here. And then there's also physical safeguards that, kind of get lost in the bigger picture, right? If we have a physical office, is it secure? who has access to these devices? Are we on a, bring your own device, mentality? Is that device being shared with a teenager at home or a kid buying, Fortnite V-Bucks with their mom's credit card and getting, scammed? Things like this we've seen. So those physical safeguards, and then ultimately that incident response plan. That is kind of the culmination of these safeguards. How are we going to detect when something has gone awry, and then how do we respond and recover from these breaches? That's what's being outlined, and what all of these things listed here on this slide are building towards, is that incident response plan.
Right, yeah, and it can sound like a totally foreign language, especially when you start getting into that endpoint protection realm. I know on a lot of those cyber liability policies that clients will send to us to walk through and check the boxes for the things that we're doing for them. Folks are like, well, do I have next gen antivirus? And we'll have to say yes. Well, that managed detection and response that we have is leveraging this AI driven next gen antivirus. Oh, okay. So that's the other confusing part is there's often overlap in the way tools, the way that technology is described. So that doesn't help reduce confusion at all when MDR and next gen AV can mean the same thing. So definitely there can be some confusion there and access controls. I mean, that can be as simple as saying only our employees can access our systems, or as complex as saying only our employees can access our systems, and we have a least privileged access philosophy. So they can only access the things that they absolutely need to do their jobs. Again, that's a layer though. So that adding that complexity, you can think of that as just adding an additional layer of protection because the last thing that we want is for everyone to have access to everything. In an ideal world, it is a little bit segregated so that let's say that I have access to everything in the company and my password's compromised and maybe my multi-factor is turned off. That means I then become a very big risk factor to the company because if someone has my password and I don't have multi-factor, then I just gave away the keys to the kingdom. So there can be a lot that can be said for limiting the access that someone has in an effort to limit that blast radius. And I know that within the WISP, in that technology section, Nick, there seems to be quite a bit of overlap too with what the IRS is talking about.
Right. Yeah. So understanding that the FTC is the main driver behind the WISP, but the IRS has also put out similar advice and requirements in some instances. So for the first one off the bat, multi-factor authentication encryption is going to be required by both. Right. Everybody wants to see that from you. Firewalls and antivirus. Firewalls can also be one of those confusing things, especially as we, see more of a remote or hybrid workforce and not that traditional firewall that lived in that office closet that was, tangled with cables, but could be a VPN, a virtual private network that's being set up. So, that's explicitly required by the IRS and, strongly implied under the FTC technical safeguards. Um, for both firewalls and antivirus, that next gen antivirus that's going to be threat hunting, providing that monitoring, layer to your solution. And then backups. Backups are something that are going to be, very similar in that the IRS mandates and, the FTC is expecting a robust recovery procedure. So that sounds like a fancy way of saying, have your backups in line to me. And then that VPN again, the IRS is going to require that for remote access, and the FTC is going to expect secure remote connections, whether that is, internally to your, cloud-based applications or using like a hosting provider like Visory to access your tax softwares like QuickBooks or Thomson Reuters suite that we spent the last week talking about.
That's right. And backups, that covers a lot of stuff. So, if you're using Microsoft and you're using OneDrive, SharePoint, email, or maybe you're on G Suites and and using your Google Mail account, and maybe you're using some Google Docs as well. Remember that Google and Microsoft aren't backing those up for you by default. There are third-party solutions that are out there that are pretty affordable, and that becomes a great business continuity layer. So if there was a compromise, there was an incident, and that environment became compromised, having that backup means having a recovery point. So a point in time recovery, being able to just sort of go back a few days. Yeah, we're going to lose a little bit of activity, but being able to recover a few days ago instead of starting from scratch becomes pretty critical if we're users of email and we don't have it all in some other practice management environment. Backing up QuickBooks, that's another one. If I'm not mistaken, QuickBooks Online Advanced is still the only one that has it as a built-in option. So third-party options become important because man, oh man, I can't tell you how many times clients of ours, accountants, bookkeepers, have told us that clients got into QuickBooks Online and just mucked it up. Went through and made all kinds of changes that they had to go through and fix. So again, having that point in time that we can just roll back not only is an oopsie saver, but is also a great saver for other types of disasters, maybe even system failure. So having that offsite third-party backup becomes super important. So if we're not backing up our mail, really great idea to put that on your roadmap, making sure QuickBooks Online is backed up, and of course any of your other file repositories, any place you're storing client data, you want to make sure you have a backup and test it every now and again. Test restoring a file and just make sure that backups are working. Backups are only as good as your ability to recover from them. I tell the story all the time about that controller at a construction office, ex-client of ours. They during COVID downsized tremendously, needed to control cost, brought their ERP software just onto a single computer and we're limping along there. The controller had a moment and decided that they were no longer going to work there, and also decided to wipe the machine. And upon doing so, the ERP was gone. The owner wasn't worried. No problem. We have backups. Unfortunately, the only backup, the earliest backup, I guess I should say, that was viable was 18 months old, and they were 2 weeks away from an audit. So it was not a good day in that office. So having backups is great. Got to test the backups. Um, so that obviously falls into like a technology area, but remember our cybersecurity stool, if we want to think about it, it really has three legs. We have our people side of things. We have our processes or policies. We've been talking about that as throughout the last half hour. So our policies are going to be things like, hey Nick, I really need for you to make sure all of your passwords have at least 12 characters and are pretty complex. I want to see some special characters and numbers in there. That's a policy. And you can set that policy in the software itself. And oftentimes in software, they already have that requirement, or you can set up some password complexity requirements for your team. Another policy is going to be about whether or not you accept attachments, whether or not your team can use personal laptops, and if those personal laptops have to meet certain requirements or have certain tools that you require to be installed. So those are the things we're talking about when we're talking policy and process. And then on the technology side, we're talking about the things that Nick just went through, like the antivirus strategy, like whether or not we have a firewall in our office, or if we're using a virtual firewall, if we're fully remote, whether or not we're requiring multi-factor everywhere. Even LinkedIn. I've heard some real horror stories about LinkedIn profiles being compromised, and then you've spent all these years building your network. What now? So that can be a tough one to get back. And then, of course, your backups. So when we're talking about tech on that stool, we're talking about those software based layers that make it really difficult for the bad guys to get in. So all three of those legs of that stool are what your business sits on. And we can't neglect any of them. We don't want a wobbly stool when it comes to cybersecurity.
Yeah. So building off of one of those legs is again the people, Sam, and training your team, right? Going back to how we started this webinar, that tax season is your most vulnerable. You are absolutely slammed, and you have a bunch of well-meaning, well-intentioned employees trying to work hard. Fingers crossed that's the case, anyways. And they push something through that they shouldn't have. They weren't thinking. They're tired, just trying to, get through that day and make sure everything is done that they have control over. And they have, accidentally now given up credentials or approved something that they shouldn't have. That's going to cause some large headaches. So, as of before this webinar and double checking my stats, over 90% of breaches are still driven by human error. That's the reality of it. We can talk about and will on this next slide about how AI is making it harder on our people to distinguish what is real and fake, but we cannot get away from that human element. So how do we empower them to overcome this and now become a boon to our business rather than a threat? And there's a lot of good programs out there that will enroll, advisory here will enroll folks on, a set training, once a year, things like that, update them on, current phishing, vishing, everything, any acronyms you can think of related to scamming, and prepare them for those, and then enrolling them in simulations throughout the year, quarterly maybe, that are taking from existing threats that have been identified, emails from your industry related to your softwares, your processes that are going to look and feel real, and reinforcing that training over the year, and even re-enrolling them in training if they should misclick. So trying to keep things top of mind, not just that once a year training, but really driving home their importance and the role they play in protecting not only your firm but the clients that you're serving.
Yeah, absolutely. And Nick, you're spot on with how difficult it's getting to distinguish real from fake. AI, generative AI, primarily, right? That's the kind of AI that is out there doing human-like things. And so that means writing these emails and setting up these text messages that are getting sent out. I know whenever we hire someone new, they almost always get an email or a text message from our CEO asking them to go buy gift cards. As an example. Right. And so fortunately, we work with folks that see that as a red flag just based on the nature of the industry that we're in. But that may not be true for everyone. That could be something, whoa, my gosh, my brand new CEO is asking me to go do this. I better go knock it out. Or I think one of the text messages that came through was asking for like a personal email address. Or even a physical address. So these different tactics that are out there to get people to give up personal information. That's the whole point of phishing. Give up something personal that I can then use. So maybe it's a password or maybe it's other information about your identity. It's not, we can't rely on, Nick, you say this all the time. We can't rely on the prince of some random country being the sender of the email to be the indicator that it's a bad email anymore. We just can't. We actually had an accountant share a story with us at the conference this week that they first of all they lead the tax practice and they also run all the IT for the company, which is a super common thing, unfortunately. That also means that she serves as the human spam filter when something that looks maybe a little fishy comes through. And she had one come through from one of her staff members that was supposedly from one of the principals of the practice, and it looked legit. The tone of the email, the words that were being used, because remember, AI can learn, and we have so much out there on social media now, in our LinkedIn posts, and in our personal Facebook or Instagram, if we have those. And so AI is able to just scrape the entire internet and really start to learn how to impersonate us, which is terrifying. I know we've heard some stories about AI impersonating building these voices, right? The voices that sound identical to the person. They only need a few seconds of audio online to be able to build that out. So the sophistication is just growing at an incredible speed. The landscape is changing. Everything looks a lot more realistic than it did. I think I saw a statistic recently that of the ads that we see online, over 30% or close to 30% at this point are AI generated. So as we progress through 2026, that trend is only going to increase. So it becomes incredibly important to focus on what Nick was just talking about, making sure that our teams are aware of the latest threats. And the way that you do that is by implementing a learning management system, an LMS that has pre-baked all of that learning. So you've got experts on the sidelines that are consuming all of this information, learning what all of the latest threats are, and then having that periodic training and those simulations, most importantly. So, safe emails that used to be bad emails that are industry specific, relevant to accounting, relevant to tax, that are getting sent out randomly to your team. And when they click on them, that platform, that learning platform says, "Oh, maybe you shouldn't have clicked on that." And then it enrolls them automatically in that remedial training so that they can get that refresher and you can continue to build that first line of defense. Because statistically, what we see is from the baseline test that happens initially, we see that click prone percentage decrease over time. So while someone might get caught up initially, we start to see it go down. And when we're talking about layers, we can use AI to fight AI too. There are some really awesome mail filtering tools that are out there now that are next gen. They use AI to build a trusted network to analyze the every aspect of the email that's coming through, and it sits in. They sit in line, so you're not changing the mail flow like some of the legacy tools that were out there. So it's the least disruptive way to filter out all of that non-productive or potentially malicious mail. So there's some great layers that are very affordable that can be put in place to help drive better resiliency for your firm and just keep that stuff out of the inbox and take the people element out of it. So getting ready for 2026, we've been talking about it. It means having your WISP either written or updated. Do you want to do this annually at a minimum or whenever any major technology changes happen? So Nick,
Yeah, we got the QR code there for the download of the template, and we're happy to go through that with anybody. We're also running a Black Friday special. Happy Thanksgiving coming up for WISP writing services. Go ahead and tell you now that's going to be a one-time fee of $5.99. So happy to help and assist anywhere we can. That's that, evaluation of what you're doing, supplementation of any services that are missing, and the ultimate, writing and deliverance of that document. You can contact us down there at inside sales at visory.net. And keep an eye out. Follow us on LinkedIn for updates. Sam and I like to travel and bump around town, talking to all of our tax and accounting friends. So follow us on LinkedIn, check out the website, and thanks so much for joining us here today.
yeah, thanks everyone. It looks like all the Q&As got answered live while we were going. The team did a great job of keeping up with those. So, like Nick said, if you want to reach out and continue the conversation, we welcome that. Thanks everyone.
Have a great day.